Welcome. Today is Erev Shabbos, Friday, and this week's Torah portion is Parshas Emor. There is a very timely mitzvah in the Parsha because it commands us to count the days of the Sefirah. Those are the days between Pesach and Shavuos, specifically the second day of Pesach until the holiday of Shavuos, and we are engaged in fulfilling that mitzvah at this time. The mitzvah itself in the Torah is quoted, of course, in the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, and post the Talmudic period, developed a custom besides just counting the days to also observe them as days of mourning because of a very sad, tragic event that occurred during this time, as the Gemara in Yevamos describes. The great Tana, Rabbi Akiva, had a very large following in his yeshiva. He had 24,000 disciples. And these 24,000 students all died one year during the days of the Sefirah, between Pesach and Shavuos. Due to the enormous tragedy of the loss of great Torah scholars, the Jews were inspired by custom to observe them as a period of mourning. By way of illustration, music is not listened to, weddings do not take place, and haircuts also are not taken. The Gemara doesn't mention this, but evidently in the period of the Gaonim, it became a practice, and as I said, it's recorded in the halachic works of both the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. It's interesting to note that the Ramah makes a comment because there are a number of various, or you might say, variations on the practices, the mourning practices. There are those who would observe the days for the entire 49 days. Most communities don't observe it that way, and they observe it for approximately 33 days, but there are many variations within that when they begin the count. I believe there are as many as 6 different practices of how to observe the Avelos days, the days of mourning during this period of time. The Ramah comments that in one community, you should have one practice of this custom, and there shouldn't be more than one custom being practiced. And the reason for that is, as he quotes the Gemara in Masechta Yevamos, based on the pasuk of Lo Siskoidedu, which is in the book of Devarim, Lo Sasa Agudas Agudas, that the Torah is very sensitive for the Jewish people to even give the appearance of having, God forbid, more than one Torah. That's how Rashi explains what's behind this. Don't make yourselves into groups. Be unified in your practices. And so if there are different customs, then let them not be in one location. And therefore the Ramah says, on the days of Sefirah, there should be one practice in each community. There should not be 2 different practices observed by the same community, so that it would not be a violation of that verse in the Torah of Lo Siskodedu, Lo Sasa Agudas Agudas. I was puzzled why the Ramah waited until this particular siman, chapter if you wish, in the Shulchan Aruch and in the Torah to make this comment. It is siman Taf Tzadik Gimel. That means it's nearly 500 simanim into the Shulchan Aruch. There were many places much earlier to make this comment, because this sensitivity is relevant to any time you have different customs. Any time there might be different practices being observed by the Jewish people, one should make sure that there is only one in each individual community. And just by way of example, there's a major dispute as to whether or not tefillin should be worn on the weekday days of Chol HaMoed. And the Ramah doesn't make any comment there about Lo Siskodedu, even though, of course, that is a sensitivity, and that one should, in fact, be very careful about that. But yet the Ramah waited till as we said, nearly 500 simanim into the Shulchan Aruch to bring to our attention the need to be sensitive and to observe and fulfill Leisis Gaidadu and not have different practices in the same community. Why here necessarily did the Ramah choose to tell us about not breaking into separate groups in our practices? Perhaps we could suggest an appreciation of this by taking a look at the comment that the Chinuch makes in explaining what the whole purpose of counting the days of the Sefirah are. The Chinuch says that it is to give us a focus and an appreciation of what the whole purpose of the emancipation from Egypt was. At the Seder night, we are obligated to fulfill what our sages told us, Chayev Adam Laharas Es Atzmoi Kilu Hu Yatsa Mitzrayim. We are obligated to recreate that freedom experience and to portray ourselves, relive it as if we were free people. But recognizing that we are free people is just the beginning. It's not just being freed from the slavery. It's not just being emancipated from the persecution that the Jewish people endured while in the land of Egypt. But it was also that they were going to realize now the purpose of their freedom. And beginning from the second day of Pesach, they will begin counting towards the holiday of Shavuos, because that's the whole purpose of indeed the creation of the whole world, that ultimately the Torah would be given to a select people, namely the Jewish people, and the Jews now are embarking upon a trip towards achieving that goal of becoming the treasured people who would receive the Torah. And therefore, they counted at that time towards that goal. They counted towards the days that they would be at Mount Sinai and receive the Torah. And we recreate that as well. It gives us a focus on what the whole purpose of becoming a freed people is all about. It is to ultimately receive the Torah. Well, if that's the whole purpose of both the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the emancipation from Egypt, and the counting of the days leading up to Shavuos, when we reaffirm our acceptance of the Torah, let us think about what the Jewish people looked like when they received the Torah. The Torah describes it in Parshas Yisrael as saying, Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Ahar. It doesn't describe it in the plural. It doesn't say Vayachanu, but it says Vayichan. And Rashi comments that is Ki ish echad belev echad. A most unusual situation and a most unusual experience that took place then was that the Jewish people were like one person with one goal in mind, one mind, and all focused on receiving the Torah. They were unified, and that unity was remarkable, as all of the Jewish people were so unified that they merited receiving the Torah at that time. And so the days of Sefirah are days of preparation that lead up to not only reaffirming our acceptance of the Torah, but also hopefully preparing ourselves to receive the Torah, and also in some small measure to recreate that feeling of unity. If that's the case, no wonder the Ramah waited until here during the days of Sefirah, when we talk about different customs that the Jewish people have of observing the mourning days. Because during these days, when we're preparing for our acceptance of the Torah on the holiday of Shavuos, we should be particularly sensitive to not looking like we are in separate and disparate groups. Because that's what was going on then. They were developing, and this unity was being forged. We also should therefore be particularly sensitive to not violating loisasa agudas and appearing to be like separate groups, and God forbid as if we have two different Torahs. So the Ramah waited. He could have made the comment much earlier. It's extremely relevant earlier, many times during the course of the Shulchan Aruch. But he waited until the laws of mourning of practices, when there are different customs, during the days of Sefirah, when we are hopefully practicing and achieving and becoming more sensitive to Jewish unity, to point out, be sensitive to it. Do not allow two different practices in the same community, so that you will not be in violation of Leisis Gaidadu, so that you will not, in fact, give the appearance of being separate groups who don't have the one Torah that unifies us all. We are now perhaps very sensitive to our lack of a minyan. Shuls are closed and minyanim are not taking place. But let's think about what a minyan really is. It's not just a collection of 10 individuals. It's the quorum that allows us to have the setting to recite a Kedusha, to recite a Kaddish, to have a public Torah reading. And we see from that this collection of the requisite quorum creates a different setting and has within it a different potential. It's not just a total of a number of individuals who happen to be in the same room, but it creates a place where the divine presence can be there. Chazal tell us that when there is a regular minyan taking place, the Shekhinah actually comes and is there. What that precisely means may be beyond the scope of my understanding. But it's there, it's real. The divine presence comes when there is a minyan taking place. And we can then recite a Kaddish. We can then say Kaddish, 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 and reciting a Kedusha. And a public Torah reading can take place. All of the things that can't take place if you don't have that quorum that is the proper setting for it. We are hopefully, of course, becoming more sensitive to that and appreciate what it is to have a community of Jews in a mini way with just a minyan. And hopefully very soon we can look forward to once again gathering together, becoming unified in a small way of the first building block of a community that hopefully will become even more unified as we create a place for the Shekhinah to come and dwell in our midst, and we will be sensitive to the Shekhinah and abide by divine will, and hopefully that will come in such a way that we can sanctify God's name in fulfillment of Mikdashti, and God will be in fact sanctified amongst the Jewish people. Have a wonderful Shabbos and a very inspiring Shabbos. Stay well and stay healthy.